So our next speaker is Ulrich Bergler, who is a data manager and senior research fellow at the University of Otago. Ulrich holds a MSc in Applied Psychology from the University of Canterbury, in addition to an engineering degree and years of international management experience. He's working with the Big Data Better Aging research team at the University of Otago Christchurch, and his role as data manager and researcher in that role, he is curating and using interRAI and linked health data, health administrative data. And today he'll be presenting on health utilisation of interRAI services by Māori, Pacific peoples and non-Māori-non-Pacific people in New Zealand. Over to you, Ulrich. Oh, hang on, I'll just move the slides forward and mute myself.
So tēnā koutou katoa, welcome, and it's a pleasure for me to speak to you. It's a bit unfamiliar to me to do this via Zoom, but I hope it will work. So what I want to present today actually stems back to the early days of my involvement in interRAI. If you just progress the slide, one more. So there's some common claims, and we just click through, Joe. Common claims that I found is 93% of people consent to the interRAI data to be used for research and policy development. It actually comes from a publication, Schluter et al., 2016. Then there's the statement, Maori and Pacific people experience an earlier onset of age-related conditions, and Maori and Pacific people underuse interRAI assessment services. It always bugged me that there is very little evidence behind at least two of those three statements. So for a long time, I tried to find out what is actually factual here. And the three issues that are combined here is, one, you've got different population demographics between Maori, Pacific, and the largely European population. Then you need to make the assumption that consenting is the same for all the subgroups. And you need to bring into the picture the aging profile. So if you just proceed. So where to start? This is where I wanted to start. And we published in 2023, we published an article that talks about chronic health conditions. But in it, if you just proceed. Next slide. Well, no, one earlier, please. We were too quick. So in that article, we reported on a cohort of interRAI assessments taken in 2017. For today's standards, a very low number of people, nearly 32,000, typical age and typical gender profile. Next slide. And in this article, there was one figure that talks to or tries to present the proportion of people in each age group and gender and ethnicity group that use interRAI assessments. I must admit, I find this image, this graphic, very tricky to interpret. So I got the source data and started modeling with it in a different way. So let's proceed. So first slide shows the estimated residential population for the three different groups. Maori and Pacific, right down low, are very similar in terms of their age and distribution and number of people for each age group. Whereas the European group has a very different gradient, which in many ways shows the wave of aging baby boomers coming into our population. Next slide. It's very similar for males. So there's not a big difference. Maori and Pacific are pretty similar, and Europeans quite different. So this slide now shows, if I look at interRAI numbers, the number of system users, health system users that we see in the interRAI data, you see the 55 to 65, which only comprises Maori and Pacific, and then it jumps to the other cohort. you effectively see that we've got more females than males using inter-RAI services. That's also known. Next slide. Now it becomes more interesting. If I now look at women and overlay the number of women of every ethnicity with the estimated population statistics, you could assume that Maori, and look at the dotted 3-month average, 3-year moving average, you could come to the conclusion that Maori use inter-RAI services more than Europeans, up to the age of about 88, where it changes. And Pacific use it until the age about 74, the same as Europeans, to then diminish. That contradicts the claims that I've been hearing ever since I got involved in this. So take the next slide. And the same is pretty much true for the male population. However, there is a difference in terms of the Maori male population that is not as dominant in terms of, let's say, assumed overuse. So I think I've got 2 redundant slides in there. Let's see what comes. Yeah, and again. So what I've then done, I said, let's take into account that Maori and Pacific age earlier. And I used the number 8 years simply because it's the number that I've been hearing most frequently in my interactions with researchers and geriatricians. What then happens is you get a picture that looks more like what the claims are. The gray dotted line are the European percentage of users, male users in this instance, of inter-RAI services. The dotted red line is Maori and the dotted blue line is Pacific. So you would see that only about half the number, percentage-wise, number of Maori use inter-RAI to Europeans, and maybe a third to a quarter of Pacific people. If we take the next slide, and the same is true for, or same picture appears with women. I want to be very, very cautious here because one, this is a very small data set compared to what we have available. Secondly, my assumption of 8 years isn't anchored in literature yet. But what I wanted to present is that, yes, we can see under certain assumption in the data what is anecdotally passed between us as researchers. I think there is underutilization. Next slide. So assuming Maori and Pacific people age about 8 years earlier, you only have about half of the older Maori and a quarter of older Pacific people compared to the non-Māori-non-Pacific to use an inter-RAI assessment. Tricky bit is we don't know exactly who is missing out. And this is where Itu's work and some of the other presentations today are really shedding an interesting light on it. One of the things that concern me as a researcher is, are we missing out at non-random? So are we missing specific population groups? Like, is there a group of, let's say, cognitively impaired people where we simply don't get consents? Therefore, we're not having them in our sample, and therefore our interpretations are wrong or incomplete, a better way to saying it. And then lastly, I want to repeat this analysis with a larger data set and also do the literature review to actually see what does the evidence say about earlier aging assumptions. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it, what is it generally? And to then have a research result that can be referenced and can be used. So this is about what I wanted to present today. Any questions?
Thanks very much, Ulrich. Round of applause for Ulrich. So that was a great presentation, Ulrich, and a real, I guess, one of the points of the knowledge exchange is to bring ideas to the floor so that you can get feedback, you can get support, critique, suggestions of what to do to, you know, continue this work. So I would just, on that note, opening the floor for questions. Any questions, thoughts? Lisa.
Hi, Ulrich. My name is Lisa Foster. I'm the Chief Executive for Home and Community Health Association. And really useful research, really interesting and sort of timely in the sense that a lot of our kaupapa Māori providers, we have a hui tomorrow actually, the challenge around interRAI assessment and how it links with some of the, I suppose, the Māori community's acceptance to have those assessments completed by someone who has, yes, they might have the tool, the cultural, the CAM tool, but if it's not completed by someone they trust and they know from their community, there may be reluctance to have that assessment completed in the first place. So you're missing them, or, you know, we're missing something in that mix. So it's just how that could be added in, because I think that's the missing link here to my view, is that we have a mistrust and we are, you know, trying to solve a problem when actually we could have the solution in it. I suppose having more people from the specific communities provide those assessments potentially, and just your thoughts on that.
My thoughts are probably more from a researcher perspective than from a healthcare provider, but I can see us repeat the analysis, for example, to look at geographic impacts. Like we could well be, I'm speculating here, could well be that the coverage of Maori in the urban settings is far greater than if we go, let's say, to Tairāwhiti or to or in the Oroveros or Northland. So finding out where exactly we have underuse will give us an area where we can, one, put more effort in reaching the communities, but it could also tell us what specific population profiles we may be missing. That's one. The other challenge that I will talk more about tomorrow at the Researcher Day is we don't actually know what the profile is of those who don't consent to the interRAI assessment. And that is for me the other unsolved question, which we struggle to answer with data because we don't get them. So
sorry, I'll look to clarify. Do you mean don't consent to interRAI assessment, or don't consent to it for it to be used for research purposes?
The latter one, for research purposes. So if we don't see the data of people, we can't know. We don't know who they are, what happens for them.
Seems an OIA-able question, though.
Thanks. You don't need to OIA us. Thanks. It's a bit rude. We can have a discussion in-house and maybe just provide summarised information about those that don't consent over time. That's, in theory, isn't a privacy breach. So yeah, just need to ask.
Okay, whom would I ask?
Not via an OIA process. Okay.
Because I didn't get your name. What was your name?
It's Jason Theobald, so he presented earlier from Health NZ. Yeah.
Oh, Jason. Okay. Didn't get you.
Hi, Ulrich. Question from Raywin Scott. Given that many having a first interRAI assessment may have some degree of dementia, how do you ensure that they give true informed consent for their data to be used in research?
Probably very good question. And it's one of the hypotheses I have why we see slightly lower consenting in long-term care settings, that there are more people with cognitive impairment, dementia. Therefore, we don't get the consenting. But I don't have an answer to your question. It's more practice of how is the assessment done, how are the person engaged and supported, do they get the right information?
The consenting process for the research is either from the individual if they're competent. If they're not, then it's from the competent individual who has that authority. So you're still getting it, consent, as long as there's understanding of why they're giving that consent. So if I'm the acted EPOA for my parent, because my parent's incompetent, and I say, yes, go for it, and I've agreed to it, then you're still getting the information.
Okay, thank you.
Question from Gary.
Quick follow-up, Jason, with the people who are not providing consent for research. I think what we need is some broad categories to see whether they're comparable. So their gender, age, CPS score, dementia diagnosis, what else? So we can see whether they are comparable, those two groups, yeah.
Would be good. And hopefully we can have a discussion tomorrow, Gary and Jason.
Yeah. Okay. Any further questions or comments? No. Okay.